Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host. Today is Devin Lloyd Day. I don't get to talk about Utah as much. I know everybody kind of hates it, but today I get to talk a lot about Utah football and specifically Devin Lloyd. So I am hyped to talk about the linebackers in this class. And joining me to do that are my guys, Tyler and Alex. Alex, we'll start with you, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, and just despite my disdain for Steven talking about Utah all the time, this is the one day of the year where I will give him the executive privilege to talk about Utah to his heart's content.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to do that. So, we had a really nice outdoorsy day for at least two of us. Alex went to the beach. I took my dad golfing here in Fresno. So, it was a good day. I don't know if Tyler went outdoors, but Tyler, how you doing, man?
Well, I did laundry. I cleaned, did laundry. I did all those things. So I hope you enjoyed the sun and everything. So yeah, I just did laundry, but can't wait to talk about linebackers. Can't wait to figure out which one Tom Telesco is going to trade up for this year.
Oh gosh. As much as I like Devin Lloyd, I do not advocate for trading up for him. I think that would be a mistake, but we'll get into it. So I think that's a good place to start and kind of, discussing how we think the Chargers can add to this specific room, or if they are going to. Obviously, we're fresh off of the Kaiser White situation, and so right now the room can definitely be described as a little lacking. With Kenneth Murray, Drew Tranquill, Eamon Augbonkamiga, and Nick Niemann. So Tyler, if you kind of had to dissect all the breadcrumbs that we've gotten, how do you think the Chargers could add to this room in this specific draft class?
Oh boy, it's such a puzzle, this linebacker group, because you see some pieces where it's like, okay, this four could be a good group. You have a first round pick. You have a former starter, sort of current starter, Drew Tranquill, that I think they like. You have Nick Niemann, who is a really good special teamer for them, which is exactly what you want out of a 6th round pick. You have Eamon Augbonkamiga, who they feel really good about. And yet I don't want any of them to start. Like, I don't want any of these guys to start. They will, but I don't know if they're all going to be the caliber that we want them to. But for this particular group, I think they're going to stick with these four. I think maybe a 7th round pick is a linebacker, but I think they're going to stick with these four for better or worse. If they decide to upgrade over somebody, it's obviously Tranquill. Murray is safe. People really want to have Murray not start. I did a poll, and some people are like, well, you're just assuming Murray's linebacker 1? I am. And so I don't think they're going to upgrade over Murray. I don't know if they're going to upgrade over Tranquill. It's really just like, it's a 7th round pick to me. But if they upgrade over anyone, I think it's Tranquill. And if they do, I think they're not I don't know if they're really even in a position to upgrade over Tranquill. But if they do, they're going to look for somebody that we'll talk about, some guys that we can talk about in a bit, who just attack the line of scrimmage, who do rush the passer. The Chargers were at their best when they had 2 linebackers that could really rush the passer. It's going to be Murray and Tranquill this year, but I think they can go Murray and say Chance Campbell or something like that later on. Just guys that get after the quarterback, have a high RAS score. So I think that's what they could do. But to me, honestly, like completely honest, I'm hearing that just everything you hear is that these 4 are the 4. And I don't think they're going to carry 5. I think they only did that last year because they wanted to develop some guys, and then Kaiser White was on his way out, and Murray was kind of hurt, and Tranquill was not reliable. This year, I think they're going to stick with 4. And I think they're just going to see these 4 the entire rest of the way, barring some spectacular fall.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be these 4 as well. the real question mark is day 3. If there's a guy they like or a guy that slips, I think they can take one. But as far as like best player available, I honestly think it's best player available minus linebacker when we talk about the first round pick, just because of how we've seen Brandon Staley value linebackers. I don't think he would take a first round pick on Devin Lloyd if he doesn't think that position is super important to his defense, or Nakobe Dean, or any of these guys that we're going to talk about in the top 3 of our rankings. So for me, I don't feel super confident in it, and there's a lot of analytical reasons and film reasons not to be psyched about Kenneth Murray, giving him another shot when you see such development in his rookie year and then like such an incredible, unfortunate regression in his second year. There's the argument that he was injured last year, but even when he was healthy, he just was never there completely. And the Raiders game is the Raiders game in terms of what there is to say about Kenneth Murray from that. But I don't think this defense values linebackers enough to spend a first round pick on one, unlike the previous Gus Bradley defense. And so therefore, I think the Chargers are probably in position for a day 3 undrafted guy. And so for that, I'll say that that's probably where the Chargers find a linebacker if there is one to add to this room.
Yeah, I think everything that we're hearing right now is that Kenneth Murray is going to be the weak side linebacker, and that's kind of a surprise to some. He was drafted to play the middle of Gus Bradley's defense, and he was going to be their version of Fred Warner and Bobby Wagner and all that stuff. He was going to be kind of that ball of clay that you can mold into that kind of player. And I was always really interested, right? Whenever I saw him and Kaiser White on the field at the same time, Kaiser was on the strong side, Kenneth Murray was on the weak side. And so I think Brandon Staley is trying to make things a little easier for him. He doesn't have to sift through as much traffic and motions and things like that as whoever plays whoever plays on the strong side does. So I think that's kind of where we're at with Kenneth Murray. I would expect him to be the starter, like Tyler and Alex have kind of said. I don't think the Chargers would value somebody like a Devin Lloyd or Nakobe Dean in the first round, where they would draft him to replace Kenneth Murray. So Murray's going to get his shot. This is kind of the third year, which we've generally seen as kind of like the last chance for most NFL players, most kind of raw projects. So it's a really important season for him. And, when I interviewed Daniel Popper a few weeks ago, he mentioned that there's still a lot of love in the building for Kenneth Murray. There's obviously the ankle injuries that he had to both ankles last year is kind of presumed to have hindered him. His adopted brother passed away during the season, so that potentially could have affected him. So there's a lot of context there that I think does need to be thrown around. But then again, you see him when he does get healthy for the Raiders game, playing over Kaiser White, injured Tranquil, and it's just kind of a mess. So this is a really important season for Kenneth Murray, but I do expect him to get that chance to kind of prove his worth this year.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, like, he does deserve to get that other chance just because of what you talked about. There's so many things this year that hopefully do not happen again, that happened last year. Obviously, close death in the family. Can't imagine that happening. Can't imagine going to work and then being criticized and fighting for my job while, my sister passes or whatever. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine being told, okay, you're a linebacker. Okay, well, now you're the will linebacker. Now you're an edge rusher. Well, now you're going back to linebacker. It's like, whoa, what are we doing here? Oh, then I'm injured as well. It was such a tough year for him. Again, everything on tape was not great. There wasn't anything there. But it's like, okay, that's what you're building on for the future there. But yeah, a lot was bad last year. I assume it just won't happen again this year. Obviously, hopefully nothing tragic happens. Hopefully they just keep, like, start of the year, you are our weak side linebacker. That is your role for 17 games, for better or worse. And I think that'll just do so much for him, because they really did a disservice to him last year.
Yeah, and I feel like they had a need to like try him at edge and try him in all these other spots just because, how the dominoes fell around him, in addition to his own injuries, in addition to, some of his own skills kind of in the middle declining. I think they just felt the need to like put him everywhere, and that obviously put him at a disadvantage compared to, say, other linebackers in the league and how you can evaluate their tape. So for me, I do hope he bounces back. I'm getting the feeling more and more that he kind of fits out of the Brandon Staley defense in the long term. but I do hope he bounces back and, shuts us all up for lack of a better term.
Yeah, exactly right. And, we're all rooting for him. We were all really excited about the player and the person that the Chargers drafted. And, there's so many good things that he has done in the community to this day that I think kind of lends itself to at least being a high character player that just needs to figure some things out on the field. And obviously we are hoping for that. It would be fantastic if he does, right? Because then you don't have to wonder about linebacker and kind of where the future is for the next 2 or 3 years. If he can prove worthy of that 5th-year option down the road and maybe get a nice little extension, I think that's a great scenario for him as well. And so James C pointed it out, and I assume that's Tyler who responded. They are high on Eamon Augbonkamiga. We've heard from several different sources that they do really like him, and they think that he can be a productive starter. And Daniel Popper has said the same thing and came on our show and said the same thing. So there's a lot of smoke about Eamon Augbonkamiga potentially being a starter. I don't necessarily think that they will hand him the position by any means, but it is interesting because Drew Tranquill didn't really play a whole lot of strong side linebacker either. And that's kind of why Eamon was able to play when Kaiser White was missing in action or getting reps in the scrimmage. So they're high on Eamon, man. And I said this on Twitter last week. If he were the starter, I would not be surprised at all if that were kind of what, came to be out of training camp this year.
I'm hesitant to buy that they're high on Eamon Augbonkamiga because we also heard a lot of guys out of training camp and before training camp last year where it was also like, hey, this guy is going to really light it up, Tyron Johnson, and then he gets cut. So there's stuff like that where I am hesitant to see it until we see it in the preseason, until we see it kind of in action in terms of what their viewpoint on him is. Obviously, last year, what they did with the starters is not play any of them in the preseason. So if they did that with someone like Eamon Augbonkamiga, for example, that would be kind of an indication that they do really view him as a starter. But yeah, I'm hesitant to buy it. And I also just don't think that being high on Eamon Augbonkamiga prevents you from taking a day 3 guy as well. Especially if you are kind of going to move on from potentially Tranquill later. And I feel really hesitant to buy it, and it's a limited sample size, but I'm pretty sure he was like the worst graded linebacker on the team via PFF. Granted, didn't get that many snaps, and a lot of them came in like that Ravens game where, obviously the whole defense was just a mess that day for the Chargers. But yeah, I'm hesitant to buy him as a potential linebacker 1 candidate.
No, definitely. And I think from watching the film and looking at the, data, that is how I feel. Like I'm just saying, like, what we're hearing is that they are high on him. So I totally get what Alex is saying. And I think that is the consensus around here. Like Eamon has a lot of things to improve, like watching him in coverage against the Ravens and against the Giants. And there was another game that he started, right? Houston. Or was it the Vikings? Because he started against the Ravens. And I know he started one other one and then played like extensively in the third.
And it wasn't the Houston one?
Maybe that was it. Maybe it was.
Well, that's the one where Burkhead duked him out in the box.
Okay, so then it was, yeah. So there are things that he needs to work on, right? He sacked Kirk Cousins. That's right. So he must have started. I'll look it up later, man. That's gonna bug me, but I know he saw legitimate action in 3 games. Okay, is what I'm trying to say. But his coverage ability is severely lacking. I think mentally he just doesn't have the processing thing down yet, and that's understandable. I mean, he's an undrafted free agent, but I think there are some intriguing traits there for sure. I will say, kind of transitioning into our rankings here, I think if they are going to add somebody in the draft, they need another strong side linebacker, because I think Tranquill and Neiman are kind of, weak side linebackers, coverage kind of players, former safeties that they really like, but they're kind of tied down into that position. So Murray can do both, I think. And Eamon is most likely a strong side linebacker, but I do think they need another strong side linebacker. So something to keep an eye on as we kind of go through this list. So that being said, let's jump into our top 10 rankings of the linebacker position heading into the 2022 draft. I think I started the running backs off last time, if I'm not mistaken. So let's start with Tyler.
Okay.
Tyler, let's do your 10 through 7 first. And then
Okay, my 10 through 7. So number 10, I have Chance Campbell from Ole Miss. At number 9, sorry again, as always, I apologize for name mispronunciation. Number 9, Darian Beavers from Cincinnati. Number 8, Christian Harris from Alabama. At number 7, Quay Walker from Georgia. I think Chance Campbell, there's a lot of guys. So I had 15 linebackers graded, and there are some who I just like don't like that much. But Chance Campbell is kind of, if you watch DeMarco Jackson, they did have sort of similar roles. And I think Chargers fans, if they watch Chance Campbell, they're going to go, wow, what a playmaker, what a really, really good player. And, get him on the team. Look at the numbers, look at the RAS score and all that. And that's all definitely there for sure. But I think he should be kind of viewed as like a maybe more upside. I don't know if his RAS score is better than Nick Niemann, but kind of like a Nick Niemann. There are some guys later in the list who attack the line of scrimmage, blitz the quarterback, trigger downhill and all that, because that's their processing and that's what they're doing as a linebacker and processing what they're seeing in front of them as a part of the defense. Some guys like DeMarco Jackson or Chance Campbell, they're more just go blitz, go attack, do whatever. And I think that's great. Like it kind of takes away from their ability to process. So when it's, they're facing Michigan, they had that gap scheme run attack or whatever, and they have to kind of process what's going on, they struggle a little bit. So Chance Campbell is kind of like that, but he's in my top 10 because, again, huge upside. He's got that attack the defense sort of mentality, but also roll, a lot of flash on tape. He's a guy who can get past the interior offensive lineman with a lot of speed. He can contribute on the edge as well. He's got a little bit of bend there as well. I think he works well versus like the tight ends and running backs, like a pulling tight end or an H-back or whatever, rushing the passer against running backs. I think he's good there. He's a little bit undersized. He's not like the best tackler in the open field. He's going to struggle with the interior offensive lineman, like head on the tackles, but there's definitely some upside there. So if the Chargers want to take a guy, it could be DeMarco Jackson from App State, or they could just, if they want somebody who can just attack, right? They just want a high RAS score upside guy who is going to blitz like crazy. You could move him kind of all parts of the defense. I think Campbell's a guy that they could definitely gamble on day 3. So, of the guys in my top 10 or the end of my top 10 or behind Chance Campbell, I think Campbell has the most upside because of his RAS score, because of his composite ranking and all that stuff he showed on tape.
So did you put DeMarco Jackson in your top 10 too? Or
no, he's 11th. So he's actually right ahead of DeMarco.
So that was kind of the debate for you, DeMarco Jackson and Chance Campbell?
Pretty much, yeah. It kind of came down to Campbell being a little bit better against, again, the tight ends, the running backs, and just a little bit more processing, a little bit more edge rusher stuff that he can do. So pretty close to see if the grade was almost the same. I just thought Campbell could do a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't get to watch Chance Campbell, but I will definitely add him to the list. So really quickly before Alex goes, obviously shout out to Tyler's mom for the super chat, as well as Ross Ackerman, longtime listener of the show. So shout out to them for the super chats. Alex, any thoughts on Tyler's list? And then you can go through your 10 through 7.
Sadly, I did not get a chance to watch Chance Campbell yet, so unfortunately that makes 2 of us, but I will circle back to that one as we get closer to the draft. I do maybe have one of Tyler's guys that we talked about in my top 10 from 10 to 7 here. We did talk a little bit about Jesse Luketa, I think previously, and I have him at number 10. I have Jojo Doman at number 9. I have Brian Asamoah at number 8, and then I have LSU's Damone Clark at number 7. And so Damone Clark was kind of the really interesting one for me because of how I went about his evaluation. I didn't know any of the spinal fusion stuff until today. And so if you watch the tape and you watch the games beforehand, you're like, wow, this is a really great player. He can play off ball. He's an intense run defender whenever he plays. One of the better ones in the SEC, and I think really has a lot of kind of comps to someone like Jabril Cox, his former teammate from last year. And he's just, he makes a lot of sense in terms of how he can just like push, players back on the offensive end. I think he's solid in pass coverage as well. But unfortunately, at 21 years old, he does have a herniated disc and requires spinal fusion surgery, or I'm not sure if he got it or if he had it yet. But he's a guy that would be higher for me and maybe in my top 4 guys if this wasn't the case. But unfortunately, you're probably looking at him as only a late day 3 pick now because of all of that. He does have a real herniated disc, unlike Ben Simmons. So that's just one of those things where you look at him and it's just really unfortunate because I don't think that he really has a long NFL career. And if you're already having degenerated disc in your back at 21, I don't think that you can have any team that's going to take him before late on day 3. But there's probably going to be a team that takes a risk on him and what he can do. But for all those reasons, not the greatest in pass coverage. I do have him at 7, but there's teams that I think could make it work. And you also have, maybe a situation like Miami, for example, where you can just kind of let him sit for a year, let him learn from some guys, and then see what he is in 2023. But a bit too much of a risk for the Chargers or really a lot of teams to take early on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chargers do have a linebacker room where they could take a chance on him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be redshirting, right? Like he is going to miss the whole season, or at least most of it, according to the reports that I saw. And that's a big bummer, man, because I really like the film. I really like the player and the stories that I was able to read about him. And then, of course, you hear this kind of injury. So I don't have him in my top 10 purely because of medical concerns. If there were no medical concerns, then he would be in my top 10, probably in that 7-8 range as well. But man, his film was really good. It's just the injury there is awful.
Yeah, he would have made, I think, like 7 or 8, just like you guys said. I think we're all kind of on the same page there. Yeah, outside of my top 10, but it's tough because you hear that spinal fusion, and I'm sure that's awful and that's terrible, but it's almost like, well, it's not a knee injury, or it's not a degenerative knee thing. So you think like, oh, okay, maybe like you can get something here. So I mean, if the Chargers take him with one of those extra 7th round picks, I'd be all for it. There's just so much there to like, and why not? So you think if they took him, you can just put him on IR and just kind of stash him the whole year? Is that kind of how that would work?
Yeah. Also, correction, a herniated disc is literally a degenerating injury.
Well, that's why you're going to med school.
That's why Alex is on the show right here. That's the
fact check.
No, man, the film is good there. I do like him as well. So I'll get through my 10 through 7. At number 10, I have Christian Harris from Alabama. At number 9, I have Darian Beavers from Cincinnati. At 8, I have DeMarco Jackson from App State. And then 7, I have Troy Anderson from Montana State. So of the two small school linebackers back to back. I don't know how high you guys have Troy Anderson, if at all.
I didn't watch him. Didn't get a chance to.
Alex?
He is coming later on the list.
Okay, he's coming later on the list. So I'll let Alex talk about Troy Anderson then, because he seems to like him more than me. So I don't particularly love Darian Beavers or Christian Harris, so I'm not really going to talk about them. I think there's, Darian Beavers to me was one of the most drastic cases of the film not matching the combine and RAS scores, because I think he has like a 9.6 RAS score and tested like a freak. And then you watch his tape and it does not match, man. Like he's moving out there at a really slow pace. So not a huge fan of those two players. Christian Harris, I think, has all the tools, but just mentally and effort wise, it's just not a whole lot of consistency there, which was kind of a big issue for me. So I will talk about DeMarco Jackson, somebody that I think could make some sense for the Chargers. He does kind of fill a lot of different roles for App State. And I think for me, just mentally, he's one of the more advanced prospects in this class. Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, posted that clip the other day of him, instantly recognizing bootleg and just going right to kind of that deep corner route. And he's just really smart like that. So I think he's not as of a high ceiling as some of these other players, but I do really like the physicality that he plays with. I like the way that he is able to recognize things and sift through traffic. So again, he is somebody that I think could make some sense for the Chargers if they do want to add, a 5th or a 6th round draft pick, maybe a little bit earlier for him. But there seems to be a good amount of love around him. But DeMarco Jackson is somebody that I'm relatively high on at number 8 for me.
Yeah, no, he's awesome. I think of him and Campbell, I think when it came to a quarterback scrambling, as soon as it's time for him to go get that quarterback to bail out of coverage or whatever he needs to do, right to him. So fast, elite speed tester, really good guy for sure. Is Christian Harris in your top 10, Alex?
No, he
Okay.
came to me around 11 or 12. So yeah, he's
Okay.
kind of just on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of have a discussion about that because I think he was someone I watched the two linebackers early on. So I watched Dean and Harris really early on just to kind of get a feel. Sorry, I didn't watch Lloyd first, but the all 22 was 45 minutes per game. So I'm like,
No,
nah.
it was rough. Yeah, no, I gotcha.
Yeah, but like I don't want to say he's the same thing as Beavers, where it's a guy who didn't his RAS score didn't show up because it did. Like I think his speed, the athletic traits, those definitely showed up. But then like he's not a good tackler. I think there are times where he's just kind of slow on the field, blocked out of plays, a bit of a ghost in the run game.
Yeah,
Doesn't offer you a lot as a pass rusher. This is a guy who's considered like the third best linebacker in this class, sometimes second, but typically like that maybe 2 to 4 or 5 range. And I just didn't see it. I mean, some of the numbers, like the numbers do look good. It was a surprise. Like I think he tested well, or in terms of our rankings, he was pretty good statistically against the run. But I'm watching him just getting shoved out of the way, not really involved in some plays. You know, maybe it's just the games that I watched, but I didn't come away at all. And neither of us, none of us did. I didn't come away thinking this guy was a top 5 linebacker at all.
Yeah, I think his evaluation is really interesting, and he's kind of one of those players for me where if he wasn't wearing an Alabama jersey, I don't know if we'd be talking about him as a top 10 linebacker in some of these instances. I just think you compare him to what you see in the Georgia guys, and even though there's questions about Nakobe Dean's physical profile, for example, like he just does so many things to the point where you can't leave him out of the top 3, in my opinion. And so, in addition to like how good he is as a tackler and all these other things, I would say the same thing about someone like Quay Walker or Devin Lloyd. But for him, he didn't really pass the eye test for me. And I didn't think that his athletic profile, like Steven indicated, is nearly as explosive as the RAS score indicates. And there's a couple other of those in the top 6 for me here when we get there. But yeah.
Now, Christian Harris, I think like there are flashes, like you see the range and you see the speed. For me, it was just like an effort thing. Like I think so much of the linebacker position is just being that guy who's always flying to the ball and always sticking his nose into scrums and just being that physical, imitator kind of presence. And I didn't really see much of that at all with, him with him. And there are times, like even Darian Beavers, like, he's trying and doing his best to chase down someone from the backside or running from sideline to sideline. And Christian Harris, just like the effort, it was just not there on a consistent basis for me. And so I think there are flashes of that, high end
Totally
athleticism. It's just the effort and the mental recognition is not really there. And so I think there's a difference, right? Like obviously not all of these players are going to have all of that mental recognition. Some of these guys have played linebacker for like 2 seasons. Like Troy Anderson was a former high school quarterback, former college running back. Like, of course, he's not going to be mentally advanced. And you can live with some of that, if there are those physical flashes. But when you add lack of mental recognition and effort concerns together, that just I'm kind of out on that player. And if I had watched, like a Chance Campbell, or I had watched and graded, a Quay Walker, then Christian Harris probably doesn't make my top 10. Like I think, once I get to Chance Campbell and these other guys, then he's probably going to get pushed down.
Yeah, I mean he was 8th for me. I think there is you want to hold on to A, sort of what the public consensus is, and B, like there are things there to hold on to. But yeah, if I could watch a couple more guys, and it's very possible he could fall out of my top 10. I'm not saying I'm happy you guys disliked him, but I watched
him. We're on the same page.
Yeah, I watched him early. I'm thinking, no way. It's kind of the same feeling I had with DeMarvin Leal, where it's like, wait, how high is he ranked on TDN's board? Like, are you sure? And but finally we got kind of. I mean, I know Alex ended up liking him, but Leal's kind of fallen. He was 17th on their board at one point. Harris being LB2. So I'm sort of glad we're at least all on the same page because we're all watching the same film. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So a couple questions from that I'm seeing about some safeties that could convert to linebacker or vice versa. Tyler mentioned Jojo Doman in the chat. He did play a lot of like slot nickel for him. He's
Yeah.
actually listed as a cornerback on Pro Football Focus's simulator. So he did play a lot of, overhang nickel is kind of how they describe it. Jalen Petre is not really a linebacker. I think he's more of a safety to me. And then really the interesting one that we didn't really talk about that Alex has is Jesse Luketa, because some people have him as an edge, other people have him as a linebacker. Luketa is somebody that I'm interested in, but I don't really know if he's versatile or just like doesn't have a position. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that I think if you want to talk about converting people to edge, that kind of leads into Leo Chenal a little bit. If you're just talking about like at the next level, what he can do as a player, I think that linebacker, especially in Staley's defense, like is just kind of a bunch of guys that do things, right? Like it's not like this guy has to do this specific thing, or this guy's the run defender, this guy's pass coverage. I think it's just kind of like a mishmash of skill sets, especially in a more modern defense. So for me, I think that you can kind of do a lot of things with these guys. Some of them are pretty versatile, but I wouldn't say that like I wouldn't take Jesse Luketa because of his position, or I wouldn't take Leo Chenal just because I think he probably won't do well in pass coverage at the next level. I think that you can kind of mishmash and make things work.
What did Luketa? How do you say it?
I think it's Luketa.
I think it's Luketa.
What did Luketa do where they would consider him an edge rusher? Was he just standing as an outside linebacker rushing, or like?
Yeah, that's what he did this past year.
Mm-hmm.
Previously to this year, he was an off-ball linebacker though. So I think in the Senior Bowl he did both, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. I didn't watch him. I didn't watch him as the edge. I didn't watch him as the linebacker, but the Chargers have met with him, so I'll have to.
Yeah. All right, Tyler, let's get 6 through 4.
Okay, 6 through 4. Number 6, I have Brandon Smith from Penn State. Number 5, Channing Tindall from Georgia. And number 4, Chad Muma from Wyoming. Brandon Smith is a guy that I definitely want to talk about, who he has not like his grade's fine. Like I have a 3rd round grade on him. But to me, it's all about the upside. This is a guy who's 20 years old. I think he's going to turn 21 this month, if I'm not mistaken. He was a weak side linebacker last year. They moved him to more of that middle linebacker Mike role this year. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why, but this is a guy you definitely want to bet on. And someone's going to find this guy and work with him and maybe just put him back at weak side linebacker rather than as your Mike backer. And this guy's going to do really, really well. This is one of those Penn State freaks. They have the defenders at Penn State, or just Penn State in general. They have those freaks. This guy already has scored 9.97. This dude in space, like as a Mike and middle processing linebacker, not as much. But when you get him in space, he's got the range, he's got the physicality, he's attacking, wide zone rushing schemes, he's attacking screens, he tested elite. I really, really like him on all that stuff on the perimeter. You can do outside zone, you can do toss, whatever. He's a total monster. There are several instances of him, just not as much like a stack shed guy, but a real pop and shed guy, or maneuvering past, some of those blockers that I think in terms of the flash of him being able to knock guys over or get past guys with that pop, he might flash more than anybody else. He maybe isn't the most consistent, but he's got some really good flashes. There was a pulling tight end against Michigan or whatever, and he just knocks him onto his ass. Like there are plenty of instances where he is destroying blockers. So pair that with him being athletic enough to carry tight ends, down the seam 1v1. He could do that. I wouldn't really consider him like that his strong suit by any means, but he's definitely a force versus those screen, those checkdowns. I really like him. Again, he's young. He's an athletic freak. He was new to his specific role this year. I think you put him back where he's a little bit more comfortable, and maybe he doesn't have to, just see ball, get ball sort of thing. Not as much that processing. And I think he's going to be really, really good. So, or you keep him in that role and you just coach him up so that processing kind of catches up to his athletic traits, and he's no longer hesitant where he's going to engage rather than catch the blocker. And I think he's going to be a really, really good player. Like I'm not saying he has the highest ceiling, but he has a real heck of a big ceiling. And I think if you're going to bet on anyone in, let's say, round 3, maybe not necessarily for the Chargers, but I think Brandon Smith could definitely be a guy you should bet on.
Yeah, I have him at 6 as well, and a lot of the same notes. I think, if you're kind of, looping these players into similar categories or similar tiers, him and Channing Tindall are very similar to me. I think those two really are like the best athletes that translates to the field. Those two players have insane range and speed and the ability to close gaps, unlike anybody else in the class. Obviously, Tindall, more experienced, has a little bit better understanding of the mental aspect of the position. Brandon Smith really is very inexperienced in that position. I mean, I know he was a starter last year. Penn State played like 4 games last year because of COVID. So, he doesn't have all these reps that Channing Tindall has under his belt. And Brandon Smith does have a high missed tackle rate, which is kind of a concern. But that's a technique issue to me because he does have the tendency to go a little too high at times. And that's something that several of these players have, of course. So it's not like, Christian Harris, for example, who just like won't do it. It doesn't have the kind of mentality to do it. Brandon Smith just needs to, tweak his technique a little bit. So we're on the same page. I think his athletic traits, really consistently pop on tape. He just needs more reps under his belt. He needs a higher understanding. And I do think he has a really high ceiling as well. So I also have him at 6. Alex, you're on mute.
All right. We are all in agreement is what I was saying. I have him in the 6 to 4 range too. I have him in number 5. And his evaluation kind of reminds me just a little bit about Jason Owe last year, where it's kind of like the production versus the traits question. Because I think he only had like 60 tackles. So he's not one of these like Devin Lloyds where he has like 200 tackles and all these interceptions and pass breakups and whatever, So he's not going to be a guy that gives you that. But it is more than the 0 sacks that you guys harped on with Owe last year. And so for me, I do think there's just that skill set and those traits that are there to bet on. For my 6 to 4, I do have Leo Chenal at number 6. At number 5, I have Brandon Smith, like I just mentioned. And at number 4, I have Troy Anderson. I will talk a little bit about Troy Anderson, but I also do want to mention Leo Chenal. Troy Anderson just plays like a souped up version of Drew Tranquil, like a little bit. I just see him kind of as a guy that's going to be different than just like, okay, he's a special teamer guy or he's like a day 3 kind of guy. Like, obviously he's going to go very high because of the RAS score, but he's one of those guys. And we talked about guys that play like their RAS score and guys that don't, where he plays like his RAS score. Like he's running around there, head on fire every play, whether he's getting in the backfield for a stop or just trying to get like a sack on a quarterback. I think Troy Anderson is just one of the more complete guys in this class. I don't think he's as high as a ceiling to the point where I could put him in the top 3 along with the, Nakobe Deans and the Devin Lloyds. But I think he deserves his due as one of the smaller school guys and is one of the more impressive smaller school guys we've seen. Number 6, I have Leo Chenal. I'm gonna guess Tyler has him higher.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you do too. So for me, like, if you just look at him and like just from his run defense snaps, from everything he can do on the field, like it's great. He recognizes things. I think in terms of just like getting to the line of scrimmage really often. Obviously tested like a freak at the combine, but he's one of those guys where it's like it didn't quite match up for me in terms of the tape with his athleticism and that. And then there is the ultimate pass coverage problem. That is like the elephant in the room on his tape. Minnesota, there's just a play where he just completely misses the wheel route and, allows the running back like into the end zone almost all by himself. So that took him down for me. If you tell me at the NFL level, we're just converting him to edge and Alex should be kicked out of the country for Chenal at 6. You can't kick me out of the country because I'm out of the country. But anyway, I will say that he's one of those guys where I don't want to say it's like I don't think he's as talented as Micah Parsons, but you could probably like put him at edge and like have some success there. But if we're just purely grading these guys as linebackers, I think his weaknesses in coverage are really strong to the point where I could not put him higher than this, second tier that we have in our 3 tiers.
Yeah, I think even Steven would agree. If we're knocking him for anything, it's coverage. So I understand. Like he's not one of my top 2 for a reason. So I understand that. I'll get more into him later on.
Yeah, and I think to me, like the concern is what kind of weight is he playing at? Because he played at 260 according to Wisconsin, and he did a lot of pass rushing thing. He did a lot of blitzing, lots of A gap stunts and things like that, and that worked for him. And he's very productive. He's very physical. So I do have him at 4. So I'm a little higher than Alex, and I do like him a little bit more, but I totally understand the concerns about pass coverage. I was really surprised, honestly, to look at his film and then look at his RAS score and see like a freak athlete. So not quite to the point of Darian Beavers, but was definitely a little bit surprised. That being said, I think the physicality and kind of the different things you can do with him do kind of lend itself towards being an explosive player. So at number 6, I mentioned Brandon Smith. I'm sure I'm going to catch a lot of heat for this. At number 5, I have Nakobe Dean. And then number 4, I have Leo Chenal. So I guess I'll talk about Nakobe Dean because he's somebody that I really, really wanted to like. His instincts are off the charts. Him and Devin Lloyd, I think, are the most advanced linebackers from a mental standpoint in this class. But there's no way that Nakobe Dean is 5'11" that he's listed at. He looks like he is so small out there. And granted, he's playing behind Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt and all these guys. But
Yeah.
I'm just really worried about the physical profile lending itself towards a consistent 3-down linebacker. So, there's a lot of things to like from an effort standpoint, from a covering running back standpoint, from a instinct standpoint. But I think he really struggles at the point of attack from a physicality aspect of the position. He's not going to have the kind of frame and length to effectively cover tight ends on occasion. So you're really putting him into a box of only covering running backs and doing zone coverage because he can't cover tight ends at all, in my opinion. And I just don't buy the frame holding up. So to me, there are a lot of concerns about Nakobe Dean. I really, really wish that I could take his brain and put it onto a guy like a Brandon Smith or put it onto a guy like his teammate Channing Tindall. But just the physicality concerns are enough for me to not necessarily kick him like all the way out of my top 10 or anything like that. Like I still have him in my top 5, but they are relevant to me.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think he's number 2 for me. I think if Chenal had been more consistent in coverage or was more of a coverage presence, I think, Chenal would have jumped him. I think if Muma was a bit better of a interior at the line of scrimmage linebacker, I think he could have jumped Dean. I think just Dean, because he affects the pass both as a rusher and in coverage enough, and I think he's good enough at the point of attack, or at least as a downhill linebacker. I think he did enough to have himself over those other 2 guys. But I definitely understand the concerns.
All right. So Tyler, let's get to your top 3 here.
Okay, number 3, I do have Leopold Chenal from Wisconsin. Number 2, Nakobe Dean. At number 1, I do have Devin Lloyd from Utah. Steven, I did slap the latest possible first-round grade on him, if that makes you feel.
Yes, there we go.
Chenal, man, like, so I talk about like Chance Campbell and the way he attacks the line of scrimmage. You can almost, if you just watch Campbell and Chenal, you can be, and I guess even Jackson, you think, okay, like these guys all attack the line of scrimmage. I think Chenal does a better job processing it. To me, so I was watching the Bootleg Football podcast. Brett Coleman's way of describing Leo Chenal. I didn't watch the player he compared him to, but he said that Brett Coleman said that he's Logan Wilson. If Logan Wilson, from the time he was born, ate nothing but Wheaties and HGH. I don't know if that applies to Logan Wilson and all that. I didn't watch him, but this dude, like, it's the most important thing other than coverage, which is very important. But when you're playing linebacker, you're in the box. The most important thing, and even Luke Kuechly has said this. And it's funny because his RAS comp is Luke Kuechly. You have to be able to affect the plays at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. Those tackles for loss, right? And this guy, 81% of his run defense tackles are run stops. That's within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. His average depth of tackle is the number 1 average depth of tackle among all of these guys. This guy is affecting plays at the line of scrimmage. Some guys, you watch them, and that's why some linebackers aren't here where he is. They're waiting for the running back to get to them, right? That's something you have to develop as you get better as a linebacker. And he just does that. He's able to get downhill Go get these guys. Second in run stops, first in run stop rate, not to mention fourth in pass rush productivity, third in pass rush win rate. Like, this guy can do a lot at the line of scrimmage. And do you want him to be blitzing and attacking and rushing off the edge all the time? Maybe not, but they just couldn't stop asking him to do it. This guy has 10 sacks on the year. He was chasing down the Purdue quarterback, 4 sacks in that game. Like, this dude just affects the line of scrimmage. He affects the game. He's able to get those big plays for you. By the way, he scored a 9.99 RAS score. Like, it's just, there's so much here to like about him. Number 2 RAS score in this class. He's the number 2 on the composite rankings. Like, there's so much to like, except for coverage. Like, you can definitely tell that he's just not going to be your twitchy, he's not Nakobe Dean. He's not Chad Muma. He's not a lot of these guys when it comes to coverage. But I do think he did enough. Like, working in zones against the tight ends or maybe a running back, whatever. I think there's enough there where you can keep him on the field. And worst case scenario, if he has to be there on third down, go rush the quarterback. Like, maybe you don't have to drop him to coverage over and over again. Don't take Chenal and then on third down go, let's just run him down with a wide receiver. So pray to God the Colts don't take him, because Bradley will certainly have him do that. But go attack the line of scrimmage. Go attack the quarterback. And so he's a lot of fun to watch. Some linebackers just wait for the ball to get to them. He's going to go get it. He's huge. There's a lot to like about him. So he's my number 3.
Yeah, Chenal was a ton of fun to watch from an instinct standpoint, from a decisiveness standpoint. It just runs around with his head on fire. And there's a little bit of Zach Bond to him, a little bit more physical than Zach Bond was. I mean, Bond was a little bit more leaning edge rusher as opposed to leaning linebacker like Chenal is. So Chenal, man, like he's really fun. And I love that you brought up Luke Kuechly, because, in that same, I think that the interview where he said was with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, and other things that he was talking about outside of being able to affect the line of scrimmage is, like, as a linebacker in today's league, like, you've either got to be able to affect the run game at a high level, you've got to affect the pass game as a pass rusher or a blitzer at a high level, or, be a true coverage linebacker. And I think you need to do at least 2 of those things at a high level in order to be a consistent player on the field in terms of getting snaps. And so if I take Chenal and I know that I'm at least getting a dominant run defender, like, that still has value, right? Like, I think
totally.
We have kind of seen that with Denzel Perryman, and of course Denzel Perryman has his issues in coverage and things like that. But if he had been able to stay healthy, like, he would still be on this team because he is such a good run defender. And I think Chenal at minimum will be that in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I just don't see him as like a Luke Kuechly. I think he's somewhere in terms of the grit and grind scale. He's somewhere between Leighton Vander Esch and Luke Kuechly. Maybe somewhere in the middle there. I just don't see him having the high upside that someone like Luke Kuechly had. But going into my top 3, I think Tyler wisely steered out of the Devin Lloyd conversation, because we're going to let Steven go on for 40 minutes and filibuster about that. So I will do the same. I do have at number 3 Nakobe Dean. At number 2, I have Quay Walker. And at number 1, I have Devin Lloyd. So I'll talk about Quay Walker, but I think he's the best NFL, linebacker prospect at Georgia. You could sort of make like a distinction between him and Nakobe Dean, but I just think he's kind of more pro ready at this point and projects better as a pro. Obviously, the size concerns are there in a way with Dean where they're not there with Walker. 9.66 RAS score and just tackles like a freak too. I think he's one of 3 or 4 linebackers who had, one of the highest 40 times along with Chenal, Troy Anderson, and some of those guys, and had in conjunction with that a really low missed tackle rate. And so he's a really great tackler in that regard as well. And it's just the way he sheds blocks on film. There's a play against Michigan in the college football playoff where he sheds a block and then just lays one of the nastiest hits I've ever seen on poor JJ McCarthy, who was just put in that position to accept the violence from Quay Walker. But he's just one of those guys when he is downhill, when he's either hitting the quarterback or the running back. I love just seeing him work like that. I do think the one knock on him will just kind of be how he reads plays. Sometimes there's times where I think he can get a little more easily faked out than some of those guys, but that's a trait that I think can kind of be coached up at the NFL level if we're just talking about linebackers. But for me, I think that his physical traits, how he projects at the next level, it just put him in that tier for me where I would put him in round one. I think Channing Tindall is another one of those guys actually that was in that conversation of low missed tackle rate, also really high RAS score. But for me, Quay Walker is a tier above those guys, given how he plays, given how easily he kind of sheds blocks, and sort of can make tackles at a really effective rate. I think that he, is the better NFL prospect than someone like Nakobe Dean is, even though he's probably not going to go as high as Nakobe Dean. And that will end my linebacker rankings, and I will let Steven talk about Quay Walker if he wants to, but more importantly, talk about Devin Lloyd.
I love you guys, man. I appreciate you supporting my my affinity for Devin Lloyd here. So I will say at number just in terms of my top three, at number 3, I have Chad Muma from Wyoming. Nice. And then number 2, I do have Channing Tindall from Georgia. So similar feelings about Alex and Quay Walker for me, and Channing Tindall. Like I mentioned earlier, his range and athleticism and closing speed is just insane. And I do think he has the ability to, be an effective cover player, which he kind of showcased at the Senior Bowl. So at number 1 for me, man, Devin Lloyd, my guy. I honestly, I never thought that I would get to a point in my life when I would watch somebody mean more to the University of Utah football team than Eric Weddle did. So I know Eric Weddle's a bit of a you guys kicking your legs up. I like it. All right. So I got my 8 minutes here to talk about Devin Lloyd. In all seriousness, though, Devin Lloyd to me it checks all the boxes that you could possibly want out of a modern NFL linebacker. And as I was saying, Utah went through a lot of shit these last 2 years. Obviously because of COVID, they had a running back, Ty Jordan, pass away at the end of 2020. Then in the middle of this past season, they had another player get shot and killed as well. And Devin Lloyd was really kind of the glue that held the program together. He was the team captain. He was the leader. And if it were not for Devin Lloyd's leadership and just character, then Utah does not play in the Rose Bowl this past season. They do not go on this crazy run and, have one of the most special seasons in program history. So, I don't know a ton about all of these other players as leaders, right? It's hard to really know that if you're not tuned in. But to me, Devin Lloyd as a pure leader is one of the best players in this class, and regardless of position. On the field, man, this guy has progressed so much. And, he was a former safety, former wide receiver, and he comes to Utah as a 210-pound lanky wide receiver safety recruit and ends up developing into one of the best linebackers in the country. So again, one of those players that is not necessarily super experienced from a mental standpoint, but man, did he work his ass off to become that kind of player. So I think from an instincts, from a recognition standpoint, he's got everything you could possibly want. He is able to affect the run as a dominant run defender, led the Pac-12 in tackles for loss over the last 2 years, was I think 3rd in 2019, playing on a loaded Utah defense. So he checks both of those boxes. And then last year in 2020, they kind of flirted with him as a pass rusher and let him, go on the edge a little bit, especially, they would go to, their dime package version, and Nephi Sewell would be the linebacker. They put Devin Lloyd on the line of scrimmage and be an edge rusher. They flirted with that in 2020. And then in 2021, he would get 10 to 15 snaps consistently on the edge. And he's got a better pass rush plan than several of these edge rusher prospects that we graded, and they do it full time. And so I think he's got the length, he's got the athleticism, he didn't test necessarily great, but I think from an instinct standpoint, he's got everything that you want that can make up for it as well. And like I said, if you're looking for these linebackers who can affect the run, who can affect the pass as a pass rusher, who can cover, then Devin Lloyd checks every single box possible. So I never really bought the top 10 hype for Devin, just because you have to really be a truly perfect linebacker to be a top 10 pick these days. But I do think he should be a top 20 player. I think it's an interesting conversation if the Chargers do truly want to take the best player available. But again, from a position value standpoint, I don't really trust that.
Mhm.
But that's my thing on Devin Lloyd, man. Like, I think he's checks every single box that you could possibly want for a modern NFL linebacker outside of running like a 4-3 Micah Parsons type of athlete. But he makes up for it in every other category. So I love Devin Lloyd. Of course, I'm biased, but I always try to be objective when it comes to my Utah guys. And
Mhm.
so I
You
don't
are.
have like a crazy high top 5 grade on Devin Lloyd, but I do think he is a first round player. I do think he is clearly linebacker 1, but I totally get some of the concerns. Like, I don't think he necessarily sheds blockers at a high level. He's one of the guys who kind of tends to get a little high in terms of tackling, but I think he's clearly linebacker 1, clearly a first round player.
Yeah, I've done this the last couple of position groups where I will bounce around names without going in some sort of like perceived order. So I don't go with like the top guy first. I just try to bounce around and see if I can find different guys, kind of be surprised. So I got to Lloyd like 4th or 5th in this group. And man, it just popped differently. I think I messaged you at one point and was like, "Holy crap, how is this not the easy linebacker 1 in this group?" And like again, maybe if you want like a Leo Chenal because he's huge and he's a crazy run defender, then like I guess I could see that. Like maybe a team would like Chenal first, but as a prospect, like Devin Lloyd, so much fun. I can't remember what the first game was. It was I think it was Stanford, inside linebacker, playing all over the field, taking guys out behind line of scrimmage, down the sideline, whatever. Fantastic player. Then I turned the USC game and he's doing like jump cross chops against the tackle. I'm like, wait, what the
Yeah.
like, what the hell am I watching? I just didn't expect that because they didn't even show that in the Stanford game. And I go to USC and he's an edge rusher and he's a good one. You know, I'm not saying that should be his full-time thing by any means, but he can basically do everything for you, and I think he can do everything well. And I was kind of bummed, I guess, that he didn't run super well at the combine, but it didn't really bug me on tape by any means. This is a guy who plays with his hair on fire all over the field. I think pretty safe. Like I hate to call a linebacker safe because you never know where you go or what happens, but he just feels safe. Like he can plug and play. If a defense wants him and feels that he can fit in that defense, like the Chargers, I think he could be an outstanding linebacker from day one because of he can do so much for your defense. He can cover, he can blitz, he can rush from the edge, all that sort of stuff. He's a really, really good player. I might only have like 12 first round grades when all is said and done on this class, and Lloyd's going to be one of them.
Yeah, Devin Lloyd was just, I mean, kind of heads and tails like above the class in terms of a guy who's going to be linebacker 1 for me. And it's just because he has the fewest question marks, I think, in my opinion. We talk about like,
Yeah.
okay, this guy's not good in pass coverage. This guy could do a little bit better as a run defender. Devin Lloyd might be like edge 3 in this class if he positioned himself as an edge player.
Well,
It's
You
a little
know,
bit of a stretch, but I appreciate it.
maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but you get what I'm saying. Like he's a very good edge rusher. Can do it in pass coverage too. He can, just kind of be all over the field in terms of where you can use him. And for me, I will put, Devin Lloyd at number 1, and I think he rightfully earns it. There's no Steven's not seeing through any Utah rose-colored glasses. He is correct on Devin Lloyd being linebacker 1.
yeah.
I do have a quick question on Devin Lloyd, actually, though. How old is he? Because I Googled this for like a weird amount of time, probably for like 10 minutes, and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, so he'll turn 24 in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was a 5-year player at Utah, redshirt as a sophomore, as a freshman.
If the Chargers draft him, it doesn't matter. They're not going to re-sign him anyway for the first contract. So, just got to get through that first one, and we're good. Yeah, Lloyd's awesome. Okay, so I do want to ask and sort of test your fandom a bit here. Not a trivia thing. What players at 17 that are going to be there at 17 would you not take over Devin Lloyd? I'm talking like realistic sort of thing. So, like Chris Olave, like Jordan Davis, David Ojabo to a certain extent, though that's a very different situation. Who are some guys at 17 that you wouldn't take over Devin Lloyd if you're the Chargers?
Yeah, so I tweeted my official list out the other day. I would put Chris Olave ahead of Devin Lloyd, but that would kind of be the floor for me. Like, I think, there's a certain extent that you get down my list and it's like, well, would I rather take a chance on David Ojabo despite his injury and his upside as a pass rusher? And I think Devin Lloyd would be right after that. So I'm definitely taking Devin Lloyd over Jordan Davis. I'm definitely taking him over Trevor Penning. I would take him over Kenyon Green. I would take him over
Okay.
Jahan Dotson. Like that crowd, I think is a fair place for him. And like obviously, like if Devin Lloyd is drafted by the Chargers, man, I'm buying that jersey as soon as that leaks out, right? Like I would be absolutely thrilled with Devin Lloyd. And from a pure football standpoint, I do think he's a better prospect than Chris Olave. I think he's a better prospect than Zion Johnson. But I think from a need and a position of value standpoint, I think that kind of, would push him down the list.
Sadly, you're going to have to buying a Devin Lloyd midnight green jersey when he gets drafted by the
Now they have Kaiser, man. They don't need linebackers.
Yeah. Alden Lozano asking about Utah questions, man. So, yeah, they've had 3 truly dominant players on defense, and Devin is one of them. Eric Weddle's the other, and then Star Lotu Lele on the defensive line is really kind of that other guy. So those are kind of the 3, but Devin to me is the best Utah football player of my life, and I don't think it's particularly close.
I believe you. I'm not going to contest that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who would be second best on that list?
Alex Smith. Alex Smith would have to be second.
Alex Smith is there. Yeah.
And then Weddle would probably be 3rd, and then 4th would probably be maybe Tyler Huntley, honestly.
I like
so.
That.
Again, like I mean, people are going to listen to this and be like, "Oh, of course the Utah guy has Devin Lloyd," and it's like, I'm able to be, subjective when it comes to my guys, and and the NFL. Like I didn't have TJ Pledger in my top 10 as a running back. Like Britton Covey didn't make my top 10.
Yeah,
you didn't put a Rutgers running back in your top 10.
No, but Pacheco deserves it. But anyway, no, I think it would be funny if Steven put Covey as like his number 1 receiver or something. But I think that he doesn't view it through rose-colored glasses, and I think the fact that the consensus agrees with him is telling.
Yeah, I mean, Steven's grade for Lloyd is 0.01 away from my grade for him. So, I mean, I'm a USC fan, really. So it should be lower for me. So that's objectively, Steven did a very good job. I honestly thought Steven would have a higher grade on him. I'll be completely honest, but that's because Steven's very objective. So I'm proud of you for that.
I was just laughing at how Steven went on for like 3 minutes about Devin Lloyd off the field, and then went to now Devin Lloyd on the field. I love it.
Yeah, man. So Devin is my guy. I can't wait to see where he ends up. Again, I never really bought the top 10 hype that was happening like early in January. Just like the top 10 is always quarterbacks, offensive tackles, edge rushers, corners, receivers, and so I'm really curious to see where he ends up, and he could certainly be a Philadelphia Eagle. I'm really hoping anywhere except for Las Vegas. I'm not really picky about that, but I think if he were I think he to me he seems like a perfect Patriots player, but I know that they need a bunch of other things. So I'm really curious to see where he ends up.
Here's another test of your fandom. If Devin Lloyd were to be on the Broncos or Chiefs, let's take the Raiders out of it. Would you buy his jersey?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, he's dead to us.
I can't.
You passed the test.
I can't buy a Chiefs or a Broncos jersey, man. I just I couldn't do that. I'd buy maybe a T-shirt, but not a jersey.
So Zaven Collins last year, the Cardinals took him, but kind of made him an edge rusher, didn't they? Am I mistaken? And Jamin Davis is really the first inside off-ball linebacker.
I don't think they really played Zaven a whole lot.
That's great.
That's kind of their thing. Like they did the same thing with Isaiah Simmons.
Yeah. Sweet.
Being bad. Yeah, honestly. So I think Zaven was kind of a hybrid at Tulsa.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jamin Davis was really like the true first off the ball linebacker, because Parsons was kind of a hybrid too.
Man, Jamin Davis went 19. Like Lloyd is better than Jamin Davis.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I think if Parsons had played, like he played his, would have been his junior season. Didn't have the off the field things that I was, I didn't grade him because of those things. But I think from a pure prospect standpoint, like I think Parsons would absolutely be better than him. But then you have, I think, Lloyd is better than Collins, and then he's better
Mhm.
than Jamin Davis.
Yeah, I think he'd be LB1 for me too.
So his birthday is in September. So I don't really know a whole lot about horoscopes, but I know Devin Lloyd's birthday is in September.
Did anyone go to his birthday?
I just looked up what the one for September is. Apparently it's Virgo, so he has big Virgo energy. I don't know. Women know more about that than me.
Yeah.
Well, we just lost our fan base. Thanks a lot, Cal. Virgo. Steven, when were you born?
January 5th. So I think I'm a Capricorn.
Yeah, you're a Capricorn. I'm the fish one. I don't remember what that one's called. Pisces. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't buy and believe in horoscope signs. But,
Okay, so Virgo and Capricorn are a sweetly matched pair that can become wholly devoted to one another.
That's Steven and Devin Lloyd, baby.
Amazing.
That is accurate, man. That is accurate. No, but Lloyd should be the Chargers' edge 3. Honestly,
he would be.
He would be. Yeah, he would be.
Like, and maybe there's some. Well, wait, hold on. Maybe there's something to that. Like, wait a minute. What if they take him, and Murray's your dime linebacker, and Lloyd's your edge 3?
I like the idea of this comment, Virgo energy. I thought the stream was about linebackers. It was about linebackers, and we've just gone off.
Now we're at the end of the show where we're talking about horoscopes. Apparently,
no one listens anymore at this point. So,
Brett's girlfriend agrees about the Virgo energy, I guess. So,
cool.
James C says he'd rather be a killer whale. What is that about?
Is that one of them?
No, killer whale is not a sign. Like Virgo,
no,
Pisces,
I thought
killer whale.
I thought the whale might have been one of the signs, but I knew killer whale. Killer whale was one of the signs.
No.
Oh my goodness. No, but we'll kind of wrap it up here, I guess. Any final thoughts, you guys, before we head out?
No, other than people in the chat. I see your comments about other linebackers. We probably just didn't get to them, man. We got to like 15 of these guys.
Yeah.
Sorry we didn't get to the day 3, round 7 guy that you really like because you grew up there. But we're trying, man. We're really trying.
Yeah, I will say my biggest blind spot is that I haven't watched Chad Muma yet. So that's a guy that I've wanted to get to. Yeah, so he wasn't in my top 10, not because he wasn't good, but because I haven't watched him yet. So that's someone I'll have to go back and watch and, readjust the rankings, maybe as we get closer to the draft. But no, I'm excited for the Chargers to take none of these guys because they won't take a linebacker because they're excited about Eamon Augbonkamiga's 33.1 PFF score.
Oh, jeez.
What was Kenneth Murray's?
34.
Oh my god.
Sorry for the hard dose of reality today.
Man, a smidge better than an undrafted free agent rookie. My gosh, that's bad. All right. So, yeah, I do like Chad Muma a lot. We didn't really get to talk about him. Maybe I'll do a different kind of video on him. But, Chad Muma is somebody that I think is going to be a really solid NFL player. There are other linebackers that I didn't really get to or really was a big fan of. Like I watched Brian Asamoah from Oklahoma, just was not really into that. Jojo Doman, I think, is really interesting as a coverage guy, but I mean, he's going to be 25 as a rookie, so that's fun. And then I didn't get to like Malcolm Rodriguez. Malcolm Rodriguez is listed at like 230, and he's like 6th round on PFF and TDN, so I didn't get to that portion of the linebackers yet. And if I had the time like I did last year, I probably would have, but this year I do not have that time.
Yeah, Brian Asamoah, I watched him get blocked 30 yards downfield against Baylor, and I'm like, oh,
yes.
I'm like what a great interior offensive line rep. He was getting pushed around in that game. So people have him as like a top 5 linebacker, and I'm like, okay, well he's over there still. He's still over there on their field.
Yeah, I have him I had him at 9. I think I had him at no, I had him at 8. But I have him on the back end of my top 10. I can't imagine putting him top 5 just because of the physical limitations.
That too.
Yeah, he will be getting pushed down the list once you watch Chad Muma. I'm pretty confident in that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But it's all good. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. We'll be back on Wednesday to do one of our other position breakdowns. I think we're moving to tight ends next. So potentially a need, maybe depending on how they feel about Donald Parham. So we'll get into that. And then, if the Chargers do make any more moves in free agency, which I know you guys covered yesterday in the Q&A, I don't really foresee anything big, obviously, but if anything else does happen, we will have you covered. So we're less than 4 weeks away from the draft, man. Every episode gets us closer and closer. Exciting times ahead, of course. So that's going to do it for us today. If you're listening to the audio version, as always, please leave us a rating or review. We really appreciate all that positive feedback. And then if you're watching this right now, please go like the video, subscribe to the channel, and just cross 1 million views. So I know you guys kind of celebrated that yesterday on the Q&A, but that's obviously something that is really exciting. So that's going to do it for us today. Like I said, we'll see you guys on Wednesday. As always, bolt up.